in the student neighborhoods. We started hearing about remote choruses, from different screens, technology platforms, all these innovations. And I was talking with a small group of leaders who I said, these anecdotes are great, but do we want to throw a wider net to learn what is going on out there in terms of innovation that might carry forward after this shutdown lets up, after the pandemic leaves? And they said, sure. So these were leaders from Virginia, from Vermont, from Ohio, from Tennessee. And we got 7 districts in 5 states to be part of this, what we called 3D study. And it was 3D because it tapped into students, into parents, and into teachers to get a triangulated view of what was happening in schools. And we had 18,000 responses. And the thrust of it was about innovation. And maybe we shouldn't have been surprised, but the biggest innovation that came forth was about technology, which really is not earth-shattering. But there was another thread that came through that really became the bumper sticker for what we learned. So if I could, I'm just going to jump ahead. Let me stop at the students, because you can see who we got from the students. You got about just shy of 6,000 students, 5,700 students across these 7 districts. The distribution across ethnicities, the diversity wasn't bad. This isn't actually far off from the national representation of the ethnicity shared here. Not perfect, but it wasn't all that far off. We really skewed female over male in the gender. Now nobody was forced to take this. I don't know if you can force anybody to take a survey, but the ones who ended up taking it, there was a 2-to-1 ratio of females over males. We skewed suburban. These are public schools. It wasn't independent. These were public schools. It skewed suburban districts. So you had a higher achieving student body that tended to respond, though we had enough of a distribution across the excellent, good, fair, poor to show some really interesting trends. And then not a bad distribution across the secondary. A couple of 4th and 5th graders snuck in, but this is primarily 6th through 12. So it gives you a snapshot of the student body. The educators, we about just shy of 3,000 public school educators across the career span, not a bad distribution. Across primary, intermediate, middle, high, you see what it is there. Again, not bad. It was driven by the core, but even through those special areas, we had 70 or 80 that showed up there from each one. That was enough of a variation to see some interesting trends. And then from the parents, just shy of 10,000, we got 9,405 parents, but they answered on behalf of 13,000 students, which again created a nice expanse from which to draw some inferences. We did not get the same diversity among the parents that we saw across the students, which is very interesting. Very skewed, much more majority white, but it was interesting. We did get the diversity in the students. So anyways, let's get to what we found, because this is really what Jane said. I think some interesting patterns showed up. If I had to do a bumper sticker of the trend that really propelled this group to grow in their interest in agency, it was probably this first finding. The more successful the kids saw themselves as students, the less inclined they were to take control of their learning. And it looks like this. Jane, is that big enough?
I think so. Can everyone see that sort of?
Can you guys see that trend there? So we asked about 30 some odd questions across this survey. SurveyMonkey was a platform, the largest platform for surveys out there. In one part, in the demographic early on, we asked the kids to rate themselves as a student. We didn't give them a rubric. We just said, of these 4 choices, how would you rate yourself as a student? And again, you saw earlier, we skewed towards good and excellent, but we did have representation from poor. We had almost 600 fair, and then you can see those from good and excellent. Then elsewhere in the survey, we asked them on this SurveyMonkey has a really interesting response scale. It's a sliding scale. And from 0 to 100, the kids can slide their meter to these milestones where they think answers the following question. We asked them to say, how much should students and teachers share decision-making over what to learn? Now, to some people, this might be a completely foreign question. You mean there is a choice? But we asked them, where do you think that, where should, if everything's hitting on all cylinders, where should that balance of decision-making in your mind come? And this is, I had to check the data 3 times to make sure we coded it right. And I had several people verify it. What we found was the more strongly the kids saw themselves as a student, the less inclined they were to take control of their learning. After we finally were convinced that we coded data right, we stepped back, we said, let's look at the literature. Can this be validated anywhere else? Because this was upside down of what we thought. And there actually was literature out there, quite a bit of literature on this. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the book written by the Yale professor, Excellent Sheep. William Dershowitz, I think his name is. This is what he saw. He said that the kids that tend to be the best students come out of K-12 and they don't have really any agency. They're good at following rules. They're good at telling them, tell me what the rules are and we'll do well. But in terms of being agentic, in terms of them exerting themselves forward instead of waiting for the environment to act on them, he said this is what he saw.
Mike?
We actually also see this in plant. Yes, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add something because there's some conversation in the chat, and Julia said she wondered if that's because they're succeeding in the game of school where teachers are in charge, which I think is what you're saying. And Kirsten was saying that was a good point, and sort of that clear line to success has more teacher control. Abby was adding. I just wanted to kind of.
Thank you. Thanks, Jane. Please stop me. I'm glad you stopped me on that. That's when we ask people to interpret what this means. That's what they often come up with. And they'll sometimes say the kids know the rules of the game and they play the game well. I understand what they're saying. I sort of cringe when I hear that because it's really not a game. The kids are being conditioned this way. We're shaping their behaviors this way. And we know the college completion rate for those who are interested in going to college. The college completion rate, I don't know if you've seen it. They are now measuring it in terms of 8 years, not 4. And actually, less than 50% of the middle class complete college in 4 years. Now, there could be a lot of economic factors and personal factors, but the fact that the kids may not be able to handle the freedom because they weren't given the freedom. If that's the rules of the game, we've got to change the game. Because this is hurting kids. And what we'll talk about probably later on is these rules of the game are actually contributing to the mental health issues in schools too. Sorry, there's a dog at this house.
I want to add that Abby was talking about how it's highly colonialistic, which is a mouthful to say. I just having said it. Julia was adding that it diminishes intrinsic motivation for kids to enjoy learning. Big
time. Yep. This is the dangerous situation we've set up. And it's not universal. There are excellent exceptions to this, but generally this is if you look at what's called the F value in the statistics, there's no doubt, or there's very little doubt this is due to chance. There's something systemic going on right here. So this was probably, like I said, probably the most striking, but there are other trends that came out too. You might have heard the expression mistaken compliance for engagement. This could be a pattern of that. So again, being a 3D study, we got responses from parents, teachers, and students. This is all, the students were just secondary. So any teachers and parents who weren't having secondary kids or secondary students, they're now from this analysis you're looking right now, were excluded. These are just teachers of secondary students, just parents of secondary students. And we asked them to what, in a Likert scale type fashion, what was the, to what degree do you agree with the statement that the remote learning experiences were engaging? You can see how the teachers answered. Most of the teachers said they agreed, a little less to uncertain, and less so to disagree. But the teachers or the students and the parents saw it almost completely different. and they were all looking at the same spring remote learning experiences. And so this begs the question, why did the teachers view this so differently than the parents and the students? And the parents and the students, you look how they almost lay over the top of each other, how the parents and the students saw it. And what we came away with, and there could, again, data doesn't give you any answers, probably begs more questions than answers, but we thought, is this where teachers are mistaking compliance for engagement? We had another teacher saw this and they said the teachers were working so hard during the remote learning to try to teach kids. Could there be somewhat of a pride of authorship in this, that the teachers tried so hard that in their mind, the students must have been engaged because I tried that hard? I don't know if in any of your circles, any of your schools, or if you see this disconnect between teacher observed engagement and parents and students observed engagement.
Julia saying absolutely in the chat.
And that's Julia from the Brain Science, right? Melissa, are you part of, you write the Imagine song, you're the author, right?
Yes.
Are
Yes,
you a
and-
former teacher, former ESL teacher, right?
I was a former ESL teacher, yes, for primary students.
Okay, and there was Abby is the assistant head of school at the Stone School.
Yes.
I don't know if she's still with us.
Yep. I'm here.
Abby, did you see this phenomenon at all in your school
During pandemic specifically?
or even beyond?
Yeah, I think yes, I think we do. I think there's a couple other layers of nuance, because we actually have a pretty like student forward, skills forward education, but it's hard for parents to understand like work put in and engagement with the actual learning. So they are often equating like the minutes spent, and we are looking at like the intellectual growth, right? And so, yeah, I think there's a disconnect for sure.
Okay. So that was another trend. We've all heard it, but just interested to see so starkly like that. Parent preference, and we won't go through, I'm just sampling right here. We won't go through all these. I'm going to show you something else too. Parent preferences for their child's learning appears to change with the age grade of the child. So let me show you what that one looks like. There we go. Okay, let's see if I can blow up one more time. So there were about 10 outcomes they could have chosen. There's also that wonderful other option. But of the 10, and most people did choose one of the 10, only about 2 or 3% put it on other. But these were, I'm pulling out the 4 that there were really some interesting trend lines here. These are parent responses, and the parents are indexed.
There's such a disconnect between college love of learning. Oh my gosh.
And it's a function of the grade of their oldest child. So are they moving towards a practical? I mean, you're right. They start out completely different, and then in some places they flip as the kid gets older. And I get torn between, in my idealistic view, God, can't we hold on to that goal being love of learning and the strength of heart? Or is it just get too overwhelmingly practical to get at the end of, when the kids are almost graduating, I got to focus on that now.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine if you added a layer called like risk taking or something to this too, you would see a similar effect. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
So again, to see this in black and white, or in this case, red, blue, green, and orange, it was just striking to see it pan out like this. So this is where we start getting into control now, or we saw it in the first one. Let me show you the first slide is, again, the parents being indexed by the age of their oldest child going through school. We can see that as the kids grow older from primary to intermediate to middle, the parents want the kids to take more control, which I think that's probably intuitive. Okay, as my kid gets older, I want him to take more control of his own learning. When you go to teach or when you go to teachers, in our sample of 3,000 public school teachers, it was pretty middling from primary, intermediate, and middle. And then maybe counterintuitively, the high school pulls that control back. The high school doesn't want to relinquish as much control as what their peers did in primary, intermediate, and middle. Again, that's probably not how we want it, but at least we, not only through this data, but through other data points, we see that grip on control by the teacher seems to bear out in high school. And I
Mike-
don't know if that's yeah, please.
One other question, I just want to make sure that I'm answering correctly in the chat. The racial, ethnic, SES breakdown of parents in the sample, and I was just saying, I know you said it was mostly suburban and overrepresented white parents in the sample. Is that correct? Is there any other detail about?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
And probably, yeah, suburban. And then this is from, these are the student perception. This is not a function of whether they view themselves as poor, fair, good, or excellent. This is just by function of grade level. And probably because the kids live in the teacher's world, we probably see a very similar pattern to what they're experiencing. So again, this is, this may not be what we want, but this is what the teachers and the students are saying perhaps is. And I don't know if you guys have seen a growing number of educational agencies are calling, no pun intended, are calling for agency to be one of the top outcomes. OECD out of Paris, who run the PISA assessment. We know that, oh my God, McCrell, the guy who works at McCrell too, but we see a growing number of agencies. University of Chicago is calling for agency to be one of the top 3 outcomes we want out of our students. But this is not how schools have been set up. As a matter of fact, there's a clash between the standards-based accountability movement and agency being an outcome. There could be a policy conflict between those two.
Kirsten has a question, and I wonder if you could elaborate. No, you're okay, because I didn't know college prep and standardized
Yeah,
tests.
no, I was just thinking like all of the standardized tests, they have to teach them to prepare for all those tests. So they don't have time to do anything else that doesn't fit in so perfectly with that.
Yeah, that's the real creative teachers that we see on the front edge of this are probably maximizing the latitude that they can.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, it's no slam dunk. And if I'm not jumping ahead, let me give you an example. I'm down here in Virginia, as I put in the chat. I'm in Frederick County Public Schools. It's a school district. They call them divisions down here in Virginia. It's a division of 14,000 students. One of the middle schools is probably 5 years into this. Actually has a program called the Next Program, where they've actually taken the core subject areas, and this is my language, threw them in the dryer, shrunk them. The kids get the core in the morning, and they can learn whatever they want in the afternoon. And these kids, the principal demographically balanced as best as he could, because it was an opt-in program. The kids who opted in, he made sure that they were demographically similar to the kids who did not opt in. So around the edges, he either tapped kids on the shoulder, you sure you don't want to come in here, to help balance that out? Because what he found was he wanted to be sure that at the end of the year, when they took the state testing, that any differences wouldn't be automatically attributed to the demographics. And what he found was that the kids in the Next Program, getting half the time in core, did as well or better than the kids not in the program. And those kids got a heck of a lot more agency, probably stronger mental health environments, deeper learning. And later on, I'll tell you a place out in Colorado Springs, Colorado, who does it in a different way. But it really begs the question about the time we're spending on the core. Do we really need all that time, or can we open up more time for the kids to learn what they want to learn?
Mike, I want to tell you, we have a late, somebody from a different coast joining us, and from Colorado. So I want to welcome Donna.
Oh.
Meet her, but Donna is, I don't know, you're not close. Are you close to, I don't know where exactly in Colorado you are now.
Oh, yeah, I'm in Highlands Ranch, which is like a suburb. I'm about 45 minutes from Colorado Springs, so not too far.
I ate at a First Watch in Highland Ranch last time. It's in Denver, right? You said it's just in Denver
Well,
suburb?
it's just Denver suburb. It's south of Denver.
Yep, I know exactly where that is. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. glad to be
Um,
here.
just two more and then we'll jump ahead. Let me show this one. The more successful kids saw themselves as students, the less likely they prioritize hope, health, or happiness as outcomes. This one really does need serious blowing up. Here we go. How do I pull that down? There we go. So again, you see that poor, fair, good, excellent student subgroups. Those are frequency of each of those subgroups. Choosing those is their prioritized outcomes. And again, it's what's interesting is, and you see those real large confidence bands because of the lower n size, because we know n size is a function of the confidence interval. But you can see there's a systemic trend that the more strongly they see themselves students, the less likely they choose these as outcomes. Again, you have to wonder, the system we've set up, how are these the outcomes we want in our kids? Less agentic, less desirous of health, hope, or happiness, and the contributing of mental health issues. Again, it's complicated. I'm sure there are a lot of factors, but more and more the data comes out says the system we've set up probably needs some serious changing. Okay, let's go ahead. You've seen this one, the bumper sticker one. Now, let me just show you. Now, remember, the second half of this survey had to do with remote learning. The first half was the big ideas of education. The second half of the survey had to do with more granular items about remote learning because that's what the districts needed. Remember, they were thrusted into this remote learning. And so they want some feedback from these three stakeholders about how it was going. So these next three questions have to do with the remote learning. This one was, what was the most challenging part of learning during this period? Not being with the teachers was one of the options they could have chosen. And you can see, look who were the ones that were more apt to choose not being with the teachers as being a challenging part of remote learning. Now, again, several interpretations are possible with this. Maybe the good and the excellent students were the ones who had the strong relationships with learning, so they really did miss their teachers. That could be one interpretation. After we see a couple more of these, I might fall in a little bit different of an interpretation. Let's go to that next one. Another granular question about remote learning. If we have to continue distance learning in the fall, which of the following items would make the experience better? More freedom to work when it's good for me. Look who went towards that freedom and who shied away from the freedom. All I can start picturing after a while are these good and excellent students holding on to the apron strings of their teachers. That dependency. And like I might have said earlier, systems that exert control, too much control, create a dependency in their membership. We see this with plants in the monocultures, in the till agriculture, where we have really stripped the plants of their natural tendencies to create their own food, to create their own pesticides, their own disease, I don't know, repellents or whatever. If you ever read the book Biomimicry, the very first chapter is about the dangers of till agriculture, and it talks about how because we've exerted so much control and we've gone to the agriculture equivalent, strict mining, strip tilling, that the plants have lost their ability to really fend for themselves. We see this with animals. There's all sorts of literature on either pet owners that are too overly controlling or zoo environments. The animals become dependent on us. I think we're seeing this in the schools. We've exerted so much control that the kids have grown dependent on us. And then finally, this is just a variation on the same theme. If we have to continue distance learning in the fall, which the following items make the experience better, more contact with the teacher, again, the same thing. So, and let me pause there if there are any questions or comments. And Jane, you're my better eyes than what I can see right now.
So Julia was just asking, curious about the racial ethnic and socioeconomic status, makeup of the student population, because there might be cultural values and pressures that could play a role. And I think we talked about that as well. If you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so I know so I can speak to this at least to some degree. I know in this next round, we're having another round of this because it's been 3 years. So we're updating, we're building on what we've learned, and we're updating. One of the schools that's participating is up in Lincolnshire, Illinois. It's up in the North Shore of Chicago, so fairly affluent. It feeds into that famed Stevenson High School PLC, and it's a very Asian-heavy population. And the principal there tells me that there's a certain culture that the students, the reverence to the elders or adults is very strong with that. And so there's a deference to this. So that might be a cultural dynamic we pick up in this next round. We didn't have a chance to explore it too much in this one. But I'd be interested to hear some of the hypotheses or some of the conjectures out there about the cultural differences that might explain some of these trends.
While we're thinking of that, I just wanted to also share, Manoj said, as we move towards more agency, is there research on what kind of resources the kids need to ensure they can use the self-directed learning time effectively, which is a great question.
Yeah.
And, curious.
So there's,
yeah, and then curious to learn about the next program.
okay, so AIR, American Institute of Research, did this is a number of years ago, actually, and this agency is built on one of the underlying models that helps to support this shift in schools is called self-determination theory. And that's been around since 1985 with DC and Ryan out of University of Rochester. And and I'm oversimplifying this, but what they contend is if we can set up environments that support 3 psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness, then people tend to be more motivated, have a greater sense of well-being. And it's kind of interesting because those very psychological needs are probably completely violated in our historical setup of schools, which could be another reason why we see motivation drop off, which the Gallup organization has been following for years. And they call it one of the biggest colossal failures of public education and maybe beyond is our allowing this drop off in engagement from the end of elementary school right on through. AIR, who upholds this self-determined learning, this agency, says there's 2 dimensions. There's context. Oh, schmuck. There's context and there's capacity. Context and capacity. Context is does the environment allow agency, which you can imagine if a teacher or whatever administration, if the environment is over controlling, then that's an environment that does not allow for agency. But even to is it manage? How do you say? I'm sorry. How do you say his name, Jane? Manage.
Manoj.
Manoj. As Manoj was asking, what skills the kids need? That's the capacity, and it's a lot of it is self-regulation. If a kid has a strong sense of self-regulation, then they can navigate the freedom they're having. So a lot of the capacity are self-regulating skills: goal setting, progress monitoring, reflection, being able to adjust. So if we can support those self-regulating skills, then the kid will have more chance to navigate if the environment is allowing the autonomy. So going forward in this next round, what we are proposing in these next round of instruments that will be administered March, April, and May is the social fabric of the community. Let me show you what that one looks like. This is actually offered by a superintendent in one of the original participating school districts. Back when yes.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
No,
I
please.
just wanted to break in a second because Julia said another thing that could be useful when I teach teachers about the science behind agency. I find many of them think about how they can provide choice rather than shifting the culture to provide empowerment and ownership of their direction in learning. And I think this is your call a little bit in the beginning, Mike. Testing and tight curriculum expectations likely plays a role in this fear Julia was saying So she thinks that it could be a balance of the two. But a lot of times people think agency means choice when it really means like a mindset, I think is how I would summarize.
Is Julia still on, right? I mean, does she plugged
Julia's
in?
still on. She just has her kids.
Yes,
Can she-
I'm here. I probably have to jump off in 3 minutes, but I'm here for a few more.
I'm really curious because it sounds like you're drawing a distinction, I think it's really important to talk about. Are you drawing a distinction between the teacher that offers choice versus those that offer really true autonomy? Is that a distinction you're making?
Yeah, I try to distinguish between freedom to choose and real agency, which is empowerment to pursue a direction of your choosing that connects with your own interests. Because oftentimes people will say, okay, I'm going to give agency by letting kids choose whether they're going to do a PowerPoint or a poster. And we have to unpack, like, that's not really agency. That is some choice. But what if they don't like either of those choices, or it doesn't connect to what they're passionate about? How are they gaining motivation through that more superficial choice? And I haven't found a great way to help them evolve their thinking, but I just recently have noticed that agency light is kind of where I see most teachers' mindset, as opposed to really being bold and kind of breaking down some of these barriers you're accurately describing that are there. I don't know what the answers are, but I'm seeing evidence of that, I think, in mindsets of teachers.
Yeah, I totally agree, Julia. That's what we're seeing out there too.
I would,
Go ahead, please.
excuse me, Mike, I would just also add, at our school, we're a new school and we're small. And even though we're small, I think we're feeling that same thing that you're reflecting. And it's almost like there's a feeling in the culture that's starting to be created that we need more structure and like the choice in the poster versus the, video, because it would be chaos if we didn't have that. And I think it's a challenge we're trying to grapple with. I don't know if there's like an easy answer to create space for empowerment, and to do it in a developmentally appropriate way as well when you're talking about secondary.
Yeah, and there's a place for agency at all spans of the developmental timeline. The University of Chicago really, they're explicit about showing where agency can show up in each of these developmental timelines. I know we only have a small amount of time left, so let me go to, oh schmuck. I don't know what happened to that one slide. It's not here anymore. Okay. Well, I had in there what variables we're exploring in this next round, and these are some of the variables that we're exploring: student strengths and the knowledge of their strengths in student agency. Because we know that a standards-based education environment is actually a deficit-based environment. It's not a strengths-based environment. It starts with the assumption that the kids don't know the standards and you try to close the gap. Very little resources are allocated towards finding kids' strengths. As a matter of fact, it's more happenstance or serendipitous if we come across a student's strength than if it's any intentionality. So we're exploring to what degree teachers and students are aware of strengths and where they learn the strengths. And we look at the weaknesses, the student knowledge of the weaknesses and where they tend to find them. And we're very interested in what the patterns we'll see in that. We're also looking at school stressors and agency, because we know where there's stress, there can't be a whole lot of agency. I mean, unbearable stress. So we're asking kids, we're giving them a list of stresses plus of that very important other, and having them help us identify what are the stressors in school. And plus, personal impact and agency. This one's out of Stuart Slavin's work out of St. Louis. Stuart Slavin explored the medical student environment and the epidemic levels of anxiety and depression on medical campuses. And he was well aware of it. And so he started taking steps to decrease that by lightening up the curriculum, by moving more courses to pass fail, by giving the students some cognitive framing exercises. He was able to drop depression and anxiety by orders of magnitude. He started exploring where these kids are coming from. And obviously they're coming from K-12. And what he found was that how the kids view the impact of school on pride, embarrassment, shame, competence. So 3 positive effects, 3 negative effects. So he's not asking about mental health issues per se, but he showed empirically that the degree to which the kids experience embarrassment, inadequacy, and another negative effect map directly onto medical scales of anxiety and depression. So asking the kids how often they experience these negative effects of learning helps to give us an indirect indication of what the mental health, some of the mental health issues on campus are. So these are among the issues we're exploring with the next round in March, April, May. Right now, we're going through focus groups with students, teachers, and educators to fine tune the instruments, and then we'll deploy them again, March through May. If anybody's interested, please let me know. We're happy. There's no cost to this. It's already being foundation supported. So any interest, we'll be happy to talk.
Can I ask a question relevant to, I know a lot of the conversations among the people that are here. In the use of the tool, Mike, have you seen a possible sort of application as a measure of change? You know, so if you're looking to do an intervention on agency, could you use this in the beginning and the end? Because I know you've been collecting it more as a way to look at what is happening, you know, what's the snapshot. But I know that there are people here doing work in all different areas, including international work, and like how might, one of the things that I've been thinking about is the way that it might be used in those contexts.
So at an initial level, I'd say yes. We're doing right now, we were planning on using about once every 3 years, but I'm sure there's a way that we could address the instrument. So there's that the reuse of it doesn't evaporate the shelf life of it, so to speak. That if people are wanting to use it more often, that we can be sure that we incorporate in the scales whatever safeguards we need, so that the repeated use of it doesn't diminish the information that it provides. And there's a number of ways we can do that. I know we can come up with a test bank that we can cycle the items through that, so the items stay fresh, but we know that they are equivalent in what they yield from the students and the parents and the educators. So that'd be, yeah, that's something definitely we could explore.
Yeah, Manoj was saying that it would be really useful for them. Cosmic Writers is really looking at the effect that their program has on, and they work with young people all over the world. They are based at University of Pennsylvania, but they do have a broad reach because a lot of their programs are virtual, and looking at the ways in which they might begin to measure those programs. So
what's interesting, I know you said Danny is from Project Zero.
so
We work with Proving Ground. I don't know if you know Proving Ground from Harvard. Danny, you familiar with that?
Familiar. Kirsten, do you know them? I know the name, but I don't know anything more than that. I've just heard it referenced, so I'm sorry I don't know more.
Sure, no, it's fine. So Proving Ground works with school districts on their data use, and they referred to me last year, and they invited me to present on a related issue down at their Charleston conference. So we're talking with Proving Ground about how this could be applied in their work too. This work.
Well, thank you all. I know it's Friday afternoon, and I know I'm getting notes. There are a couple of people that couldn't come, but we'll share. And the study that you referenced, I wonder if we can find something. I'm happy to share out afterwards, so you'll get a little follow-up note if there are things that could be of use for you. And Mike, thank you for
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for
this from Virginia.
sharing a Friday
I don't know
afternoon.
where you are exactly. Mike is like always, it's where in the world is Mike Nicholson. It's always like right now, and in Wisconsin. So I just appreciate all of you showing up and being part of the discussion. And I'm looking forward to the ways we can think about using tools like this, because I think so often there are other measures, you know, like Cosmic Writers is building writing skills, creative writing skills, and they're, you know, sometimes you might want to look at the change in writing, but sometimes you just want to look at the change in things like agency, or the fact that people begin to see themselves as writers. You know, Mal, your work in creativity feels like very connected to this. What are the ways we can capture that feeling of empowerment and you are creative, you know, that sense of growth. So I don't know if there's anything else. I appreciate all of you, and I know people had to, you know, sign off, but if there's anything else. Donna, it's good to see you.
Yeah, I just, I've just been taking this all in, but one thing I did want to say is that I convinced a group of teachers a few years back when I was teaching middle school. I was actually teaching middle school math, and I don't know why they followed me, but they did. And I said, we're going to give this a whirl, and we're going to give up our entire morning, and we're going to let students we're going to let them follow their passions. What's your passion? And let's do this. And so they made these little mini groups, and they worked on the SDGs, and I ended up taking 8 kids to Rome because they won a big contest. So to me, and we fit in all the other stuff. You can fit it in there. It doesn't have to be so traditional, but I know that I'm not usually the norm. So, so I think the biggest hurdle to me that I've seen from the work I've done in the classroom and in other classrooms around the world is that it really begins with the teachers and changing their mindset and giving the power to the students and saying it's okay to relinquish control and let them do it because it's their learning journey. So that's all I want to say.
It's awesome.
Well, thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Have a good
you.
weekend.
All
Go
right.
Eagles. Go Eagles.
yeah.
I'm a Giants fan. I can't say go Eagles. Sorry.
I mean, I don't even know. I'm not going to be watching football, but you know, you all, I just appreciate you all, and I know I'll talk to all of you soon. Kirsten, it's nice to meet you and see you, and
It was so nice to meet you. Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
yeah, and
Thanks for
upcoming, we're gonna have Manoj's group from Cosmic Writers is gonna be presenting, and you know, your group from Harvard from Project Zero is going to be presenting. This is just a space for us to share our work, and you know, we're growing. I'm still getting notes from people right now, so you never know who's going to show up. But I'm glad you all did.
Amazing. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great
Yes.
weekend. Take
Thank
care.
you. Take
Weekend
care.
all.
Everyone,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye bye.